and welcome back to IQ Robot Games Camp. Here we are together again in session 5, and I am so excited for the capstone challenge that we are going to be playing today. As you probably remember, my name is Audra, and I'm one of your Vex Camp counselors, and today I cannot wait to tell you all about this capstone challenge. This is going to be the biggest challenge that we've had yet in our Robot Games Camp, and I think you are absolutely going to love it. So before we get too far into the capstone challenge, let's talk about all of the things that we're going to need for this big challenge game. So just like we had in previous sessions, you're going to need your pre-built Clawbot and your charged IQ battery, as well as your charged IQ controller. You're also going to need your Vex IQ kit because we're going to use the USB cable again, just like we did in the previous session, as well as some other pieces from our kit. We're also going to be using Vex Code IQ. So you're going to need a device that can access Vex Code IQ. And again, you may want to have a separate device or 2 windows pulled up so that you can see what we're doing in camp and be able to follow along and code in Vex Code IQ at the same time. In addition to the Vex IQ elements that we're going to need, there are also some household items that you're going to need in order to set up your Capstone Challenge game space. So we're going to need about 4 to 5 feet of open space where we can set up the game and run our robot. You're going to need some tape or some string or some way to mark off the starting point for your robot. So we're going to need 3 different bins or boxes. I have the same one that I use for robot basketball, and then 2 additional bins or boxes. They don't have to be the same size, but you just want to make sure that they fit in the space that you're using. In terms of our game objects, we are going to need 3 of one kind of object. Here I have some empty soda cans. You can use soda cans or a water bottle. Just make sure that the things that you're using are empty and don't have any liquid in them. We don't want any liquids around our robots, but 3 of one kind of object. Then we're going to need 5 of another kind of object. Now here, I have the same paper balls that I used for robot basketball. I have the 2 from that session, and then I made 3 more, so now I have 5 altogether. And the last object we're going to need is one that we're going to build from our kit. But before we get to building that special item, let me tell you just a little bit about this capstone challenge so you can get just as excited as I am. The goal of the capstone challenge is to drive your robot around and use the arm and the claw to lift up and score objects in all of these different scoring areas. However, unlike any of the challenges we've done before, this challenge is bigger and better. To play the capstone challenge, your score is made up of 2 scores. You have a driving skills score and a coding skills score. So what does that mean? Well, that means that when we set up our field, which we're going to do together later on in this session, you're going to drive your robot around using the controller for 1 minute to score as many points as you can in your driving skills. Then you'll reset the field. Then you're going to code your robot to drive around and score as many points as it can without using the controller. So just those autonomous coding movements like we did in our robot basketball session. To get your score for the capstone challenge, you're going to add the score from driving skills with the score from coding skills. We'll put those together, and that will be your capstone challenge score. And the goal of the game is to score as many points as possible in each of those matches, so this way our whole score for the capstone challenge is as high as possible. How does that sound? Pretty fun, right? So now that we know everything that we're going to use in order to play the capstone challenge, if you don't have those objects ready to go, you can pause the video and go gather up all of the materials that you're going to need. We're going to spend some time together later in the session actually talking about how to set up this space. So if you don't have it set up yet, that's absolutely fine, and we'll do that together a little bit later. As with all of our previous sessions, at any point in time, you can pause the video and rewind or replay if you need to see or hear something another time. We want to make sure that you can use this video as best you can so that you have the most fun possible playing the capstone challenge. So now pause the video, gather your materials, and then join me back here where we will create our special object for our game. Okay, so in addition to the household objects that we're going to use in our game, we are going to build our very own unique special game object. So in order to do that, you're going to need 4 6-pitch standoffs and 2 24-tooth sprockets. So you can take these out of your kit, and then once you have them here, we are ready to build them into a small little game piece. So all we're going to do that is we're going to hold our one sprocket, and we're going to use the standoffs to connect these two sprockets by sticking them into the holes on the surface. So we're just going to use these sprockets as a little round game piece to make sort of a cylinder out of our sprockets and standoffs. So I'm going to stick these 4 standoffs in the 4 corners of that square in the center of my sprocket. And once I have the 4 of them in the bottom piece, then all I'm going to do is take that top sprocket, I'm going to line it up here, and I'm going to attach it in the same 4 corners of the top piece. And you might need to wiggle your standoffs around a little bit to get them all lined up. That's fine. But once you have them lined up, you should be able to press it together. And there we go. Now we've got our extra game piece. This is going to be really, really special. So I'm going to keep that out so that I can use it for some of the testing that we're going to do before we get ready to play our game, because I have something really, really cool to show you about your Clawbot and your controller. All right, so far we have learned how to drive our Clawbot around, and we've been using the built-in driver control program on the Brain. Now, that is a great way to play the Capstone Challenge, but what if I told you that there was a way to make our controller work even better for us? We can do some things in VEX Code IQ to customize our controller so that our controls work exactly right for us and the way we like to drive. So there's a few different ways that we can do this, and we're going to learn about all of them together. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to need to once again connect our robot to VEX Code IQ. This will look very similar to what we did in our previous session when we were building projects for Robot Basketball. So you're going to want to get your USB cord and connect it to your device with VEX Code IQ. If you are using that cord to charge your battery or your controller, you can unplug it, and we're just going to use it for this now. We also want to make sure that our battery is inserted into our Brain. So if it's not, you want to make sure that we press it in, again, till we hear that click, and then we can turn our Brain on to make sure that our battery is charged. So now I'm going to jump over to my computer, and we're going to open up VEX Code IQ together. So now I've navigated to codeiq.vex.com. So you can see that up here in my browser. Again, that's codeiq.vex.com. Now I have already opened a new project. When you open codeiq.vex.com, you may have an existing project that's already open. We're going to create a new project. So if you haven't done that yet, we want to open up the File menu and select New Blocks Project. Then your workspace should look just like this and be nice and empty. So now that our robot is connected with the USB cord and we have our brand new project ready to go in VEX Code IQ, I'm going to open up the Brain tab here and select Connect. Again, I'm going to be prompted to select the lowest number, so I will do that and connect the Brain. Okay, so now I'm going to get ready to start my project. So just like we did before, we're going to select File and Open Example so that we can open up that Clawbot Drivetrain 2 Motor template. Because again, that is the easiest way for us to make sure that our configuration is all set and we know that all of our motors and ports are configured correctly. So now that I've done that, I'm going to name this project Custom Control, because that's what we are trying to do here. We are going to customize our controller so that it works the best for us to be able to score as quickly and efficiently as possible. So now I'm going to select Save to save that name. Now I'm going to show you something really special. Now I told you that there's driving skills and coding skills in the Capstone Challenge. Did you know that you can save multiple projects to your IQ robot's Brain? So up here, where right next to our project name, where it says 1 slot, If we select that, it will open up and give us the option of 8 different slots. That means that I can tell my robot where to save this project so I can save multiple projects on my brain at the same time. This will make it really easy for me later on when I need to switch between driving skills and coding skills. So I'm going to go ahead and select slot 2 here. So now when I download this project, it will automatically go into slot 2. So the autonomous project that I had saved in slot 1 before will stay there, and now I have a new project in slot 2. Okay, so now that we have our project all set up and ready, we are going to add some controls for our controller. Now, we're not going to use the blocks in the toolbox. We are going to open up something called the robot configuration. So over on the right-hand side in this light blue part of the toolbar, you'll see a few different symbols, right? This question mark here is the built-in help that will give us some help about the blocks. We have a few different options. We're going to select this one right here that looks just like one of the cable ends that plugs into a port. So we're going to select that, and that is our devices window in our robot configuration. So here we can see all of the things that are pre-configured from that template. But now we are going to configure one more. So we're going to add our controller, and we can use the configuration in order to code our controller so that it works a little bit better for us. So we're going to select Add a Device, and then right up here, the very first thing, we're going to select Controller. So what this devices screen lets us do and what it shows us is all of the different buttons and the joysticks on our controller that we can use in order to move our robot. So with the built-in driver control program, we use the left and right joysticks, and we use the front, left, and right buttons. But for me, controlling the arm and the claw, especially the claw with those front 2 buttons, is a little bit uncomfortable. So I want to think about ways that I can change the buttons that I'm using to control my robot to make it easier for me. Because the easier it is and the more custom my controller is, the better I will be able to drive around the field and the better I'll be able to score points. So to begin with, let's start with looking at what we can control in this devices window. So these 2 big circles over here represent our joysticks, right? It looks just like the top of our controller. So I can select the left joystick, and then this little picture here will show us what we are configuring. So when I select that first and don't have anything on the other joystick, this now shows me that this is controlling my robot to drive forwards and backwards and to turn left and right. So that's the same as the left arcade that I had in my driver control program. If I now select the right joystick, I can move that all the way over to the right. If I select both joysticks, now I can get to that split arcade situation. And if I keep selecting the joysticks, you will see that they will change the way that my robot is moving. Now, my preference for driving is left arcade. So I'm going to move all of my controls over to the left. So you can follow along with me to build your controller the same way that I'm controlling it right now, just to be able to test it a little bit. And then later on, you're going to test out a bunch of configurations to figure out the one that works the best for you. So right now, if you want to set yours to left arcade as well, you can. Now, let's think about where our arm and claw motors are. So now, if I select these E buttons, I think that for me, that's where I want my claw motor to be. So when I select the E button, I can see that claw motor pops up. If I select it again, I can change it to arm motor. But I want to put my claw motor up there on those buttons so that way it's easier for me to control. So here it's set to close with E up and to open with E down, but I'm going to select that little arrow so this way I'm pressing the up button to open and the down button to close. Now I'm okay with where the arm is already, so I can change that or I can leave that. I can put the arm on my right control or my left control. I can keep that over here on the left. So this way everything is on that left side. So now my arm motor is moving down with the L down button, and up with the L up button. And that works for me. Again, you are going to have an opportunity to check out many different configurations. But for right now, just for this test, you can follow along to select these buttons. Now, once we have selected the buttons that we want, I'm going to select Done. So now we can see in our devices, the same way that everything else is configured here, we now have our controller. Now, here is the thing. Because we added this to our configuration, we have added this to a VEX Code project. In order to use our controller with this configuration, we need to download this project. Even though there aren't any blocks right here just yet, we need to download this project to our robot so that way we can use it with the controller. So we still have our robot connected with its cord and we have our brain connected. So I'm going to select Download so that this will download to my robot. Now, when I disconnect my cord, here we go. I have my driver control project ready to go. Now I'm going to turn on my controller. Make sure your controller's on. They should remember one another, but if you need to repair them, you can do that. So I have my special game object that I made here, and I'm going to put that on the table. And now we're just going to test out these new controller configurations. So in order to start this project, I can see that on the brain it says custom control, and I'm going to press the check mark in order to run this project. So once it's done calibrating, now I can move my robot using just that left arcade joystick, right? When I move the right one, nothing happens. I'm a lefty. This works really well for me to be able to drive around on just the left-hand side. So I can drive my robot. Now I moved my claw to close and open with these E up and E down buttons. And I moved my arm over to be able to raise and lower. So now I can raise the arm with the L up button. I can lower the arm. I can let it go. I can open the claw, close the claw, and I'm ready to play with this configuration. Now, this may not be the configuration that works the best for you. The beauty of changing configurations in VEX Code IQ is that you saw all the different buttons you have there, right? We have 2 joysticks, we have 2 sets of front buttons, and 2 sets of top buttons. That means that there are so many different ways that we can change the configuration in order to meet your needs and your particular driving style. So the drivetrain is always going to be controlled by the joysticks, but we can change where the arm and claw motors are, and we can change the organization of those joysticks, right? So I'm going to press the X button here on my brain to stop that project. So let's take a look back at that configuration and talk about some of the other things that you might want to experiment with. So now if you want to change your configuration and when you go to test different configurations, you can open up that very same project. You'll keep that devices window open, select controller. And now if I said, well, you know what? I don't like having all that stuff on the right side. I want to move some things around. So we can do that by pressing the different buttons in order to move our arm motors, in order to move our claw motors. We can select and deselect in order to get things working in the way that works best for us. Once something is configured in one set of buttons, you can't move it to another one, but that makes sense, right? They can only be configured in one place. So now that I have everything here, if I select this left button, there's nothing left to configure. So I can select those and take away the arm motor and move it over there if I want to. I can detach the claw motor, and then I can be able to move that up here in the top. So your job right now is going to be to test out as many different configurations as you can until you find the one that is your absolute favorite. So the goal here is for you to change the configuration, and each time you change the configuration, you're going to download that project to your brain and test it. Once you have found the configuration that is your favorite, that you think makes you drive like the absolute best robot driver out there, make sure that you save that project so that way we can use it as we move forward, getting ready for the Capstone Challenge. All right, are you ready to go be a great test driver? Here we go. So go pause the video, adjust your configuration, test out a lot of different configurations. You may want to have different game objects and your boxes that you're going to use to score just to have them out as practice. right? We don't need our whole field set up. We just want to get a feel for what's comfortable for us. Once you found your favorite configuration, come back to the video and I will show you even more tips and tricks for customizing your controller. Okay, I am sure you have found your absolute favorite configuration now. And now we are ready to show you even more custom configuration that you can do. So now that we figured out the most comfortable way to be able to drive and manipulate the claw and the arm, we want to think about ways that we can make some of the game elements a little bit easier. So what do we know that we're going to need to do in this game? What we're going to need to do in this game is grab objects from the floor and put them into the boxes, right? So what is our robot going to need to do? It's going to need to use the claw to grab and the arm to lift, right? We're going to do that over and over and over again. We're then going to let go of that object and lower the arm to go get another one. There's some combinations of movements that we know we're going to want our robot to do a lot of times. Well, guess what? Using VEX Code IQ, we can customize our controller so that we can actually code a button on our controller to do multiple movements just with one press of the button. How amazing is that? That will definitely help us to speed up our scoring process so this way we can score more points even faster. So let's go take a look back at our custom control project and I will show you how to control individual buttons to do multiple actions. So here I am in my custom control project. Again, I've saved it so that I save my favorite controller configuration. Now, just like we have this when started block here, if I go over to my toolbox and I click on events, so now in the events category of the toolbox, I can see that I have the when started block, just like what always pops up in my projects. But I also have some other blocks that are shaped like this, including one that says when controller button pressed. So what I'm going to do is drag one of these blocks into my project right here. Now let's talk a little bit about what these special event blocks are. So see how they have this little curved shape at the top? These are called hat blocks. And some of our blocks, as you know, have little notches on the top and the bottom so we can connect them together. Well, hat blocks are a hat block because we can't attach anything on the top. They have a hat on top of them. We can only connect blocks below them. And when the condition of the hat block is met, it will run the stack of blocks connected to it. So we see that this hat block says when started. So when my project is started, that condition is met and all of those blocks will run. Now in this hat block, it says when controller button E up is pressed. When that happens, this stack of blocks will run. Now I already have things configured on my E up button, but I don't have anything configured on the F up button. So I'm going to change this parameter to F up. And when that button is pressed, it's going to run the blocks that I put in this stack right here. So what did we say we needed? We wanted our robot to do over and over again. We wanted the claw to grasp an object. So what do we do? What do we use in order to make that happen? Well, when we were playing robot basketball, we used this spin claw motor closed block. So we're going to drag that over here. So this way, when that F up button is pressed on the controller, my claw motor will spin closed. Now it's grabbed the object. What else do we need it to do? We needed to lift the object. So we're also going to drag a spin motor to position block. Now here, I don't want to spin the claw motor. I want to spin the arm motor. So I'm going to go ahead and change that. You can follow along to change this with me. Again, anything that we're doing in here, if you want to change your configuration later, you're going to have an opportunity to do that. So we're spinning the arm motor to position 250 because that will take the arm all the way up so that I know it's ready to score inside of the box. So now that I have added on to this project, I'm going to save my project just to make sure that I have it for when I'm ready to use it later or adjust it later. And now I'm going to connect my robot again and download this project to the robot brain. So I'm going to plug in that USB cord one more time. I'm going to make sure my brain is turned on. Then I'm going to select the brain icon from the toolbar. Select connect. I'm going to get prompted about that lowest number. Select the lowest number and connect. And now I can download this project to the brain. So now when I detach my USB cable, let's see how this project works. Okay, so now when I press this check mark to run my custom control, I'm going to see if this F up button can actually work to grasp and lift one of my game objects so that I can score it into the basket. So I'm going to press the check mark, going to let it calibrate for a moment, and then we can see that now I can start to drive my robot. Now I'm going to just test out that button, and we can see that it's already grasping and holding. So now I can lower the arm, and I can open the claw, and now I'm ready to try to go grab one of these game objects here. So I'm going to drive forward. You can test this out with me. We're going to press that F button. Whoop! It got a little cut on my box, but that's okay. It did what I wanted it to do. And here you can see that now it's just holding it up there. So I know that it's ready to be dropped inside. So now when I press the buttons to open and close my claw, it will drop that object right in there. And that is going to make it so much easier for me to score really quickly. So now I'm going to press the X button here to stop my project, because now all I wanted to do was make sure that I could test it and that that button worked. We can now test that with other different game objects, but there's also still empty buttons on our controller that we can use in order to control different things that we're doing in the game. So now we've automated, in a sense, that ability to grab and lift an object. So we are ready to drive, grab, lift objects, and get ready to practice playing the Capstone Challenge. Are you ready to set up this game? I am. All right, I'm going to clear this stuff off of my table, and I'm going to show you exactly how we're going to set up this game. All right, so here is our setup for the Capstone Challenge. So let's talk about what we see on the table in front of us. Then we're going to talk about how this game works and how we're going to score the objects. So within your 4 or 5 foot space, here mine is set up a little bit smaller just because of the space that I have in our camp space. We're going to have our 3 boxes in 3 of the 4 corners of our area. In the 4th corner is going to be our starting space for our Clawbot. So we want to make sure that our Clawbot fits inside that starting space, and I've used some tape to mark it off. Now we always want to make sure that our scoring objects and our scoring locations are in the same place, because not only are we doing this with driving skills, right? We're also playing this game with coding skills. So that means we're going to need to have some pretty precise measurements and locations for different objects. So you may want to mark your objects with tape in your space or with something to let you know exactly where they are or the distances between them. Now our object that we have 5 of, so here I have my 5 paper balls, those are going to go 3 down the center and 2 on the side. So basically 1 goes in between these 2 boxes, 1 goes between this box and our Clawbot, and 3 go down the center of our space. The object that we have 3 of, so here my soda cans, we're going to place in 3 different spaces around our Capstone Challenge area. So the first of our cans goes in front of the Clawbot at the end of the row of paper balls. Another can goes on the opposite side of our field at the end of the row of paper balls. And the third one goes in between this box and our Clawbot right over here. So basically, we're making a big X in the middle of our field with 3 boxes in the corners and our starting location over here. Now, you're probably saying to yourself, but wait, Audra, what about that super special piece that I built? Well, guess what? That one is called a preload piece. So that one is going to be able to start already in the claw of your Clawbot. So from the moment your game starts, you will already have a game object that you are able to score. So that object starts within the claw. So now that we know how our game is set up, let's talk a little bit about how our game is played and scored. So the scoring for both driving skills and coding skills is exactly the same. Your goal is within 1 minute to get as many of these game objects into the boxes, into the scoring zones as possible. Each paper ball that you score is worth 1 point. So each one that is in a box at the end of the round is worth 1 point. Each of the cans that you score is worth 2 points. So these are worth more points than the paper balls, but there's fewer of them on the field. So if I have 2 paper balls, that's 2 points. If I score another can inside of there, that's now 4 points inside of this bin. Now, let's talk about our special object. Our special object is a double multiplier. So wherever we score our special object, all of the things that we score in that same bin have double the points. So now that my special object is in this bin, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 times 2. This is now worth 8 points. So you really want to think about where you're scoring your objects once you put that special one someplace in the bin. Now you might be saying to yourself, wait a minute, Audra, this is so easy. I can score all of these things. Haha, but we don't have unlimited time in which to score our objects. We only have 1 minute. So now that might sound like a long time to you, but I promise you, it's probably not as long as you think. So now that you've seen my setup and we've talked about the rules of the game, it's a great idea for you to get your space set up. So you're going to pause the video here, and if you haven't already set up your space, you want to make sure that your capstone challenge looks just like the one that we did here. When you pause the video, you'll see a picture to remind you of where everything needs to go. So pause the video now and go set up your space, and then when you come back, we're going to talk about how we're going to get this game started. All right, is your capstone challenge ready to go? I bet you are super excited to play. So now that you have your game set up, we know the rules of the game, we know the scoring of the game, and you have your customized controller, you are ready to start to play. Now, as with any competition, right before we compete for real, we want to make sure that we're practicing so that way we have the best chance at scoring points as possible. So what you're going to do right now is pause this video and use your controller and your robot to play 2 or 3 1-minute rounds of driving skills. So you just want to be using your controller to drive around and score as many objects in the bins as you can in 1 minute. At the end of that 1 minute, you're going to total up your score and see how you did. Then when you try the next time, you want to try to beat your score, right? The same way we would when we play any game. So pause the video now and go practice playing the capstone challenge. And after you have practiced a couple times, you can come back to the video and we will talk more about playing this game. All right, welcome back. How did your practice match go? My practice match went pretty well. I wasn't able to get all of the game objects on that first try, but that's okay. That's why we practice. Before we move on to the next part of this capstone challenge, let's just take a minute to make sure that we're all scoring our games in the same way. So I'm going to flip my camera now so you can see the game objects that I scored and the exact place that my robot was when that 1 minute driving skills ended. Okay, So here we can see that I've scored some things in different bins, and I left some that are out on the table. So now if we remember how we're scoring, let's make sure we can total these up all together. Now, even though I have a paper ball here in the claw of my robot, that one's not going to count for anything because it didn't get scored into a bin. So I'm going to start up here with this bin. So in this bin, I scored 1 paper ball. So I'm just going to make a little chart here that says the paper ball and the can. So in the first bin, 1, 2, and 3. So now in the first bin, I scored 1 paper ball, so that's worth 1 point, and 1 can, so that's worth 2 points. So now that means in that first bin, I got a total of 3 points. Now in the second bin, I scored just 1 paper ball here and 0 cans, so I have a total of 1 point. And then over here in this last bin, I scored 1 paper ball, 1 can for 2 points. Then I had the multiplier in there. So that's 3 points times 2 gives me 6 points. So my total score for this driving skills would be driving skills is 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I scored 10 points. Not too bad for my first try. I bet some of you scored higher. I bet some of you scored lower. That's okay. That's why we're going to practice. So this way we can all maximize our score. So let's talk about a few things that might make our gameplay a little bit easier or a little bit more fun. So one of the things that was tricky for me as I was driving around in that 1 minute watch was keeping track of exactly how long 1 minute was. It was a lot shorter than I thought it was. So there are some things that we can do in VEX Code IQ that will help us to know how our time is moving. So let's go back to our custom controller project and let's talk about some other things that we can add to our project to help us know how our time is going in our driving skills match. So here I am back in my custom control project, and I'm back in the events category of the toolbox. Now I can look through my hat blocks and I see that there's a hat block here that says when timer. So I'm going to drag that one into my project. I'm going to close up my devices window for now so that I have a little more space. So let me make this a little bit bigger so you guys can see. So now my when timer hat block, when the timer is greater than, this is the symbol for greater than, when the timer is greater than a certain number of seconds, I can have a set of blocks run. So now I want to think about when my timer is, when my 1 minute is up. So I could change this to when my timer is 60 seconds, when it's greater than 60 seconds. So the moment that the timer turns to 61 seconds, I can make my robot do something to let me know that 60 seconds has passed and that my driving skills is over. Now, if I go to the sound category here, I can have my robot brain play a sound. So I'm going to drag in a sound block. So now when I run this project, when the timer is greater than a certain number of seconds, a siren will play. Now, for right now, I just want to test this out. I want to hear what that siren sounds like. I want to see how this works. So I'm going to change this parameter to just 5 seconds. We can change this parameter over and over again. We can change the kind of sound that our robot plays. We have a lot of different choices here. I'm going to stick to just the siren, and I'm going to change it to 5 seconds just to test it out. So sometimes when you're building a project like this, you want to test out little things, and you don't have to set them for exactly how you want it to work, but you can set it for something like 5 seconds. We'll try it out, and then we can always go back and adjust. We want to make sure that our robot brain is on, so that way when we plug it into our USB cable, we can select the brain and connect it. So now I'm again reminded the lowest number. I'll select that and connect it. Now I can download this project. So now I'm going to test out my project. I'm not going to do anything with the controller because all I want to focus on right now is how this when timer hat block works and what kind of sound my robot's going to make. So when I press the check mark, my robot will calibrate, and I can watch the timer on the brain screen and then listen, and I hear it make a sound once it goes over 5 seconds. So now that can help me as I'm trying to figure out how far I am into my match. Right now, I might not want it to go off just at the end. I can also set a when timer block to go off at 30 seconds and play a different sound to let me know I'm halfway through. Or maybe to go off at 50 seconds to let me know that I have only 10 seconds left. We can add multiple different when timer blocks to our project, so this way we can have our robot basically help us to keep track of our time, which will help us as we're developing a strategy to score more points in this capstone challenge. Now that sound only happens once and it's a little bit quiet. If I'm getting really distracted or really excited, I might miss it. I wonder if there's another way. I wonder if there is something that I could see on my robot that would tell me how my timer is going. Oh, there is. I can use the touch LED that's in my IQ kit to be able to make my robot glow a color on that touch LED in order to have both a visual and an audio clue about how the time is progressing in my match. Would you like to see how that's done? I think that would be a pretty neat addition to all of our robots. So get out your IQ kit, and from your IQ kit, we're going to get out a couple of things. So to add the touch LED to our robot, we're going to need 3 things. We're going to need our pins, because we're going to use a couple of those. We're going to need the touch LED itself. So this is what the touch LED looks like. It's going to be in your electronics bin. That's the same one that holds the controller. And you'll see that it has a little white Vex logo on it, and it has a little port. It also has a space in the back that we'll use to attach it to our robot. So the touch LED can respond to our touch, but it can also glow colors all around this white part. And that's what we're going to use in order to be able to see on our robot when we have a lot of time and when our time is up. Now to connect our touch LED, we're also going to need a 200mm cable to go from the touch LED to our robot brain. So in order to connect this, I'm going to grab 2 of my 1x1 connector pins out of the little pin box. I'll set that aside. Then I'm going to bring my Clawbot over. Now, there are a lot of different places on our Clawbot that we could attach this touch LED, but I'm going to attach it right here on the back of the arm because I think that'll be a really easy place for me to be able to see it as I'm driving around and playing the game. So I'm going to stick 2 pins into the back of my robot here. I'm going to put them on the diagonal just to help my touch LED stay intact a little bit better. And then I'm going to connect my touch LED on the back using the holes, and I'm just going to plug it into that. I want to make sure that the port side is facing down, so that way it's already in the direction that it needs to go when I connect my wire to it. And then I'll just snap that on just like that. Now I'm going to take my cord, my 200mm smart cable. I'm going to plug it into my touch LED. And then I'm going to take the other side and I'm going to plug it into port 12. That's down here all the way on the bottom of the brain. You can see that's port 12 right here. I'm going to plug it in and I want to make sure that I hear that snap so that my touch LED is plugged in nice and solid. All right. So now I have my touch LED connected. Now, how do I make this touch LED glow? Well, that's something we're going to do in VEX Code. So here I am back in my custom control project. And now the same way that we configured things like the motor or things like the controller, we're going to need to configure this touch LED, right? We want to be able to tell VEX Code that we're using a new device. So this way we get the blocks that we need in order to control it. So I'm going to come over here again and select this little port icon to open up the devices window and open up the configuration. So now I'm going to select add a device. And then I'm going to look through to find the touch LED. So you'll see right here, it says touch LED, and it looks just like that touch LED that we just added to our robot. So I'm going to select that, and now it tells me to select a port. Well, we plugged it into port 12, so I'm going to select port 12. Then I'm going to select done. Every time we add something to the configuration, we have to select done in order to make sure that it gets added. So now here I can see that I have touch LED 12. And now if I close this and I come over to the looks category of the toolbox, I now have touch LED blocks that I can use to make my robot glow a color while I'm playing the game. So if I drag in this set touch LED color block, I can see that I can set the touch LED to none, which is what it's doing right now. It's not glowing, but I can also set it to glow a whole lot of different colors. So I think it would be really helpful to see it glow green when it's a good time to drive and to glow red when my match is over. So I'm going to set it to glow green. Now I'm going to attach this set touch LED block to the when started stack. I'm going to move these blocks over to give me enough space. So now when my project is started, that touch LED will glow green the whole time. When will it stop glowing green? I have to tell it to stop. So I want to tell it to stop when my timer hits that level. So again, right now, just for testing purposes, we're going to keep this at 5 seconds. But what we're going to do is drag another touch LED block over here so that when our timer hits the second mark that we want, our robot will play a sound and will glow a different color. So there I'm going to set it to glow red. You can set it to whatever color you want. If you have multiple timer blocks happening, you can have multiple colors, just like you can have multiple sounds. So now I'm going to plug my robot back in and download this project just to be able to test out and see what the touch LED does when we're using it this way. So I plugged in my robot. I'm now selecting the brain icon. We're going to get our prompt, select the lowest number, and connect. And now I will download this project. Now I'm going to unplug my robot and let's take a look at what happens. I'm going to make it nice and I'm going to just hold it since I'm not going to pay attention to anything else besides the sounds and the colors. So now when I press the check mark on my robot brain, you can put yours down on the floor. I'm just going to hold it to make it easier for you to see. When we start that project, it will calibrate for a moment. And there it goes. And now it is glowing green. And now when our timer hits 5 seconds, it glows red and we heard that sound. So now we know how that's going to work. And you can see that when I put my robot down, I can see that glowing color all over the place. No matter where it is, I can see that that color is glowing. So that will help me to know how far along in my match I am. And anything that we can do to help give us an idea of how much time we have left will help us to make choices about how we want to drive and how we want to score. So now that I've shown you that, let's go back into our project and set that timer for what we actually want it to be. Since we're done testing now, I can set this timer back up to 60 seconds. So that way my project is ready to go. And then I'm going to save this project so that way I have it ready for when I'm using it and adapting it to meet my strategy for playing the game. So I'm going to save to my device because as always, we want to save early and save often. So this way we always have a project to be working from. So I'm going to press the X mark here just to turn that off because now that we have practiced our game, we've talked about the scoring, we've customized our controller, we have added things to our robot to make our gameplay a little bit easier. Now it is time to really get into the Capstone Challenge. And now it's time to talk about game strategy. So anytime you play any kind of a game, whether you're playing with a robot or not, you probably have some kind of strategy, right? You have a way that you think you are going to be able to score the most points and win the game. Well, the same thing happens when we are playing games with our robot. So for the Capstone Challenge, there are some things that we can think about as we develop a strategy. And your strategy is going to change the more you play the game and the better you get at it. So what we're going to do now is come up with a first strategy and get that process started. So that way you have a way to get going with your game strategy as we move forward. Okay, so the very first step to developing a really good strategy for a game is that you have to understand how to play the game and what the rules of the game are, right? So what are some things that we know about the rules of the Capstone Challenge? We know that there is a driving skills and a coding skills match. We know that each of those matches are 1 minute long and that the scores from each of those matches are combined to get our Capstone Challenge score. Now, what do we know about the way those scores are calculated? We know that there's 3 different game objects, right? There's 1-point objects, there's 2-point objects, and there's our special object that is our multiplier. Now we know where our objects are on our spaces and we know where our scoring locations are. We also know that our special object or our multiplier starts as a preload in our robot's claw. So let's think about and write down the 3 ways that we can score. Because when we're trying to develop a strategy, writing things down is a really, really helpful way to keep track of all of the ideas that we have in our brains. So let me switch back to our top down. So now that we just said them, let's write down the ways to score. So we can score 1 point for a ball. We can score 2 points for a can. And we can score a multiplier of 2 times points for the special object. So now we know the 3 different ways that we can score. So now let's think about how we can use that information in order to talk about the scoring opportunities that we have in the game. Is it possible for us to score every single item on the field? I don't know. Maybe it is, but it might not be. So if we can't score every single thing that's in our game, what's going to give us the best chance at having the most points? Well, we can score all of the cans, and that will give us double points, but there's only 3 of them on the field. We can score all of the balls because there's 5 of them, but they're only worth 1 point each. So we want to make sure that we're balancing out the different scoring opportunities. We also want to think about how we're using that multiplier. Because if I put that multiplier into a box and then I don't put any other game objects into that box, guess what? That multiplier multiplies 2 times 0, which is 0. So I won't get any points for that multiplier. And we definitely don't want that to happen because that's a really great way to score more points. So the first thing that we've done here is made sure that we understand the game and we've analyzed our rules a little bit. The second thing that we've done is that we've identified our scoring opportunities. So we know that we can score 2 points for a can, but there are only 3 cans available. We can score 1 point for a ball, and there are 5 balls. And we can score 2 times points for the special object, but it has to be in a bin with other objects. It has to be with other things. And that's an important thing to think about because we start with that object in our preload. So we know that that's the very first thing that we're going to be able to score. So we don't want to drive over, score it, and then forget about it, right? We want to make sure that we're scoring it and then following it up with some other objects, right? So now we're getting to the stage where we're ready to brainstorm our initial strategy development. So let's think about one way that we think we could score the most points, right? We were just talking about putting our special object into one of these bins. Well, if we put our special object in a bin and then we score everything else in that same bin, we're able to use that special object to multiply the most points. So now I'm going to write that down. I'm going to write down this first idea that I have for a strategy. So I'm going to write down my first strategy here. And let's make sure that we're all clear on what that is. So my first strategy is to score all the objects in the same place. That might also help me as I'm driving around the field, right? If I know that I'm always coming back to the same location, it doesn't matter which bin I score them all in, but I want to score them all in the same spot. So now we also want to think about, in addition to how we're scoring, we want to think about how we're moving around the field. Because we can see that our robot in this corner here, when our game is all set up, it's kind of blocked to get to different things. So we have to take that into consideration also, right? How are we going to be able to navigate around the field to get to something without knocking our objects out of our game space, right? So maybe we want to drive diagonally, even though it's further away, because then we'll hit the paper balls and they won't travel as far as a can would. So there's a lot of different things that can come into our strategy. And again, this is just our first strategy. The more we practice and the better we get at playing the Capstone Challenge, the more our strategy is going to change. So right now, we have an idea for a first strategy. But just because we have the idea doesn't mean that we can do it. There's still a couple things left that we want to make sure we can do before we go to test our strategy. So we want to make sure first that our robot is able to do the things that we're putting into our strategy, right? Do we think that this robot, as it is right now, is capable or able to score all of the objects in the same place? Well, yeah, we've been scoring objects in all of the different bins. We've scored all the different kinds of objects. So we know that it can do that. If we came up with something that maybe we wanted to adapt our robot or we wanted to make the claw bigger, we could do that, right? We could spend some time to adapt our robot just like we did in a previous session to make it work better for this game. That's all part of our strategy. But for right now, we know that we can score. We know that we can get all of the objects into any bin that we want. So we don't need to adjust our robot. Now we know that the Capstone Challenge has both driving skills and coding skills. So we want to make sure that our driving skills and our coding skills and all of our programs in VEX Code IQ are able to do the thing that we want to do in our strategy. So does our coding skills project move the robot so that it scores all of the objects in the same place? It might or it might not. So what we want to do now is make sure that we can think about how we need to program our robot to drive to the same place. If we're scoring all of our objects in the same place, are there things that we want to add to our custom controller to drive our robot back to the same location all the time? So there are things that we can do to help us figure out if our robot is ready and if our programming is ready for this strategy. And once we've established that, yes, our robot can do it and our programs are ready, then it is time to test out our strategy. So what you're going to do then is say, okay, I have this idea. I have a plan basically with my strategy. I'm going to try to score all the objects in the same location. And then you'll do another practice round. And that's exactly what you're going to do right now. So then you'll want to practice driving your robot around, trying to score all of the objects into one of the bins. Again, it doesn't matter which bin you choose. Maybe this is your favorite. Maybe it's this one over here. But you want to practice trying to drive all the objects to the same bin and see if that helps your score to grow. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. After we've tested it out, then we can sit back and look at what our score was and say, okay, how did that go? Well, I got more items in the same bin, but I didn't get as many items as I did before. Was that better or worse? How can I make it better? And then we'll refine our strategy and come up with a second strategy and a third as we get ready to practice and play the Capstone Challenge. So your job right now is to test out this first strategy of scoring all of the game objects that you can in a 1-minute driving skills match in one location. So the special object, the cans, the balls, whichever ones you choose, try to score as many as you can in 1 minute in one location. So now you're going to pause the video and go test that out. And once you've practiced that strategy, you can come back and we'll talk a little bit more about how you can get ready for the Capstone Challenge. So how did your strategy testing go? Just like we wrote down some things that can help us, we can also write down some things that went well or things that didn't go so well that we want to improve. Maybe your strategy changed completely after you tested it out. That's great. You can keep practicing to get better and get ready for your Capstone Challenge, because what's going to happen next is that you are going to play the IQ Robot Games Camp Capstone Challenge. You're going to play both the driving skills and the coding skills. So you may want to set aside some time to practice your driving skills and get your strategy, and then to practice your coding skills where you can further develop your autonomous project to grab objects and drop them off in different bins. You may want to have the same strategy for both driving skills and coding skills, but you might not. It might be easier for you to code your robot to move to different bins. That's okay. You don't have to have the same strategy for both parts of the match. That just makes the challenge that much more fun. Okay, so we talked about downloading our project into slot 2 so that we could have 2 different types of projects to play this game, the driving skills project and the coding skills project, and that we can save both of those to the brain so that we can run both of those projects really easily. So let's talk about how we get to each of those projects on the brain so that way you can move between your driving skills project and your coding skills project very, very easily. I'm going to jump over to show you a zoomed in version of my brain screen so that you can see what we're doing a little bit more clearly. So here I am back at the home screen on my brain. In order to see my projects, I'm going to use the right arrow button to toggle over to this icon that says Programs. And then I'm going to use the check mark button to select it. Now here you can see here's my robot basketball project that's still saved in slot 1. And now anywhere that I see this little VexCode icon, that tells me that there's a project in that slot. So if I want to open up the robot basketball project, I'll wait till I'm highlighting that. I can see the words and I can use the check mark in order to open it. If I want to now toggle over to slot 2 to my custom control project, I can use the right arrow button to toggle over to that project and press the check mark, and now I can run it. When I want to go back to that other project, I can press the X button. That takes me back to Programs. Now here I can see a number 3, which means I don't have anything in slot 3. Now I'll use the left arrow button to go back to my first project. I can use the check mark button to open it. And there we go. Now I have gone back and forth between 2 different projects on my brain. So that's something that you are probably going to want to do as you are moving back and forth between driving skills and coding skills for this capstone challenge. So your job now is to go practice and compete in the capstone challenge. I can't wait to hear about what kind of amazing strategies and projects you come up with to play this game. Once you've played the game and you've gotten your score, play it again. Try to practice some more. See if you can get the best score possible. You can also challenge other people in your house, in your family, or your friends to be able to play this capstone challenge with you. You could have a little tournament if you wanted to. If you want to make the game more challenging, you can make the space bigger. You can add more game elements. You can add another multiplier to your field and really go crazy. The Capstone Challenge is there for you to have as much fun as you can and to practice all of the things that we've learned in our Robot Games Camp, so this way you have an awesome time with your VexIQ robots. I know I've had a great time with you in Robot Games Camp, and I hope that you have had so much fun too. So go forth and have a blast in the Capstone Challenge.